Hey everyone, welcome to that Rugby Union Show. I'm Colin Jinga and so looking forward to the next chat and the next guest as we continue to build up towards the international season. And what an international season is going to be. The Springboks have plenty to play for, but there are a couple of pretenders to the throne, France being amongst them, and we will be facing them later in the year. The French will also be playing the All Blacks as well in a three-test series. So we thought we'd throw the spotlight on France. And to help us do that, I could think of no one better than former SA Rugby Player of the Year, former Springbok with 53 test caps to his name, and a man who's made his life in France, our French connection, Gurthro Steenkamp. What a pleasure to see you, my brother. It's been many years. You look young, fantastic. Bonjour.
Bonsoir, comment tu vas?
Très, très
Great to be great
bien.
to see you,
Bien,
man.
merci.
Super, super.
Yeah, that's as far as my French goes, and I can imagine, Good, that
It's good,
your
man. It's good,
French,
man.
having spent this there, is really, really good. And I want to sort of look back at how you ended up where you ended up. But before we start talking about the coaching and what it is you're currently doing, your journey is one that's always fascinated me. You started off in the Cape, but I think if you were to ask anyone who ever played with you, your blood is blue, and you have a very soft spot for the Bulls.
Definitely, we will not talk about that other team who shall not be named with the blue and white stripes. So I'm a blue ball through and through, and but also not to forget, I started out at the Cheetahs. That gave me the platform and the opportunity to develop as a young player, and yeah, I still have great memories of my stomping ground, Loftus Versfeld. Just had a chat the other night with former opponent Ali Williams, and we were talking about the good old Loftus days. So yeah, still have a soft spot for the team, but yeah, if we ever cross paths, no mercy.
Yeah, that's definitely a conversation I want to have, and I'm thinking of Francie Stain joining us hopefully on the show over the next couple of weeks to talk about the Cheetahs. In a very tough spot at the moment. They not part of the URC. They missed out on European competition, and have no home, almost like the Pumas up in Bumalanga, who would probably play a season that amounts to 2-3 months of rugby for the rest of the year. These guys are just, sort of professional gym goers. They do a lot of practice, but very little rugby, which I think is very sad and probably talks to one of the things that we're going to touch on, and that's when it comes to depth in the South African teams when it comes to the international, particularly the European competitions. But you played for the Bulls. 2010, I think, was your big year in SA rugby. And I remember because I was there when they announced the player of the year that year very proudly. But you also broke your arm. If I remember, you had your arm in a cast when you received your award, and it was a very debilitating injury at the time. How much of a setback was that? You won Player of the Year, and you've got this massive injury, and you don't tend to think of a broken arm as a massive injury, but for a prop, it can be.
Before we go on to the broken arm, I think to give a lot of people context that led up to that 2010 year, 2009, I got humiliated against Leicester Tigers, played against Castro Giovanni, and it was that bad. I was told I'll never wear the Springbok jersey again, and that my career's coming to an end. And I still remember the headlines back then, Gurthro's been castroed. And my dad back there told me, son, I think you should go visit friends in the UK and in France. Take 2 weeks, decide what you want to do. I don't think you should come back home. So that was tough time for me. That was a massive setback. I was disappointed in myself. I was with Yanni Duplessis and Chili Boy Ralapella back at the time. It was the first time we were confronted by the double shove in the scrum, playing Super Rugby. We just hit, got the ball out, and we played. So there was a lot of hard work, a lot of soul searching behind that. And I won't lie to you, well, I was this close to hanging out my boots with the pressure that I experienced from the media, the pressure I experienced from fans. I was in a really dark place. But then I reminded myself of, why I was playing rugby. The power of rugby took myself back to that 13-year-old boy or 14-year-old boy watching the Boks win the World Cup in 95 for the first time. But accelerating forward to breaking my arm is actually Dwayne Vermeulen that broke my arm. I fell on him. Didn't do that on purpose. And that was a tough one because that was probably one of my greatest years. If you talk about setbacks, when people write you off and you think you will never wear that Springbok jersey ever again in your life, and just to give people a bit of context with being a Springbok, it's everything to us. We don't deliberately underperform. That jersey represents something unbelievable. We see that today, but that jersey meant everything for me. And the most important thing for me was to get that jersey back. And I was driven, I was motivated, and I was fortunate enough to have a great team around me. My Bulls teammates, I had the coaching staff as well, that backed me, that gave me guidance. A guy that was pivotal in helping me come back then was Gary Botha, because we were focusing a lot on the scrum. But yeah, that's life, eh? When you're riding that wave and you think everything is going well, you freaking break your arm. And then you think, okay, a year before the World Cup, there you go again. And back then, myself and Beast, we were in tough competition. We really, really respected each other as athletes. We pushed each other. We always tried to beat each other at fitness. And Beast was a strong man and he's a legend of the game. And, it was that tight. If I didn't give it my all and I left that gap, and that worried me back then, that would give Beast the opportunity to play ahead of me in the World Cup. But luckily, I recovered from that. After Wayne, he broke my arm for a second time, actually, in a tackle again. But I managed to recover and
Typical,
make it in time
typical.
for the World Cup. Yeah.
Yeah, for 2011, and yeah, I traveled with you to that World Cup as well in New Zealand. It was a tough tour, or tough end to the World Cup. But I want to take you back to the Bulls very briefly because you mentioned a couple of names, and you mentioned Gary Wood, and now you're taking me back. I wasn't even thinking about Bulls. But 2010 would have been Heineke Meyer Bulls team. And did Anton Leonard make a reappearance around that time, or at least a year or two before that?
No,
Because he was
that
quite
was in 2007. 2007 was with Heineke and Anton Leonard.
okay, 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 okay. Yeah, so
2010 was France Ludica.
was Francie Ludica, and then
Yeah.
2011 was New Zealand Rugby World Cup,
No, no.
where we, yeah, shall not be named ever again on this show, Bryce Lawrence, saw the Springboks to an early demise in a match that I was so disappointed. I mean, I was there, sitting in the stands, and the heartbreak is something that you can't really explain to people, because once your World Cup it's over, it's over. You pack your bags the same night, and you wait for your flight the next day. It really is a bigger letdown than I think fans of the game tend um, to deal with. And I think that's one of the big things that I've always loved about you, Gert, is that you've honestly sort of always thought about the mental aspect of the game, the impact. You yourself have been through some tough times growing up as well, and you speak about that. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how, if you are able to share what it is that I thought set you apart from other players, that you were it wasn't a good time, to be honest, you know? I think nowadays it's easier for people to speak honestly and openly about things that emote, and I think back then, maybe not as much, and while I'm having this conversation, I just want to remind anyone watching, feel free to drop in a comment or a question, give us a like, share, subscribe, and we'll also share Gurthy's channel as well on this, because you've also been very active online, and it's beautiful to see. But the mental aspect of the game, I think, is a very big part of why you are as successful as you've been, as a player and a coach.
No, definitely the mental aspect's very important. The amount of pressure that we go through at times, sometimes it becomes overwhelming, and it becomes unbearable at stages. But I was fortunate to have a great support system, having friends that back me, but most importantly, my family, my parents, my dad. They taught me at a young age, if you want to achieve something great, you got to work hard. You got to work 10 times harder. And being a person of color back in the day, in order to earn your spot, you needed to show that you're way better than the rest. And that's how I grew up. It wasn't just being at the same level as others, but it comes down to those tough times, those hardships. I remember being at university in Bloemfontein. I didn't have a car, didn't even have a bicycle. I had to get to training. I had to run to training. My dad would say, listen, the man above, he gave you a pair of legs, brother. You got to run. You got to go. And I would run to training, do 10 times, 20, 200-meter sprints as a warm-up, get training, and then run back. That became my whole, how can I say, ethos, if I can put it that way. You know, my work ethic was, I was never the most talented player. I had this big chest, skinny legs, and I always had this great investment around me. And, you know, it's just making sure that I'm always putting in the hard yards, because firstly, respect is you can develop skill over time. I always say that if you combine talent with effort, allows you to develop a skill, and if you combine skill with effort, it allows you to achieve something great. And injuries happen, setbacks happen, but most importantly for me, it was those setbacks that helped me and guide and learning from them, but also allowing myself sometimes to feel what I was feeling, not to give up. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to that intrinsic motivation. My parents, my family have sacrificed so much for me to go to an unbelievable school. I went to Paul Boys High, and I couldn't disappoint him. But I had this burning desire to be a Springbok. I had a burning desire to be one of the best in the world at this stage. And I was willing to do what was necessary. And yes, with a bit of retrospect, I made some mistakes. There were times I didn't get selected, and it would be easy to blame the coach. And that's probably what I did back then. But now, doing a bit of soul searching, you know, that's on me. But it's so important that rugby players today and athletes today, that they have the ability and the freedom to reach out. Because if you look back, you know, we did a lot of partying, which wasn't always the greatest thing to do. And we didn't always have this platform or the space where we could be ourselves. Say, listen, I'm struggling. I'm not doing well. You know, what can I do? Someone to speak about. Now it's different. Coaches today are a bit more mindful, or I, at least as a coach, I try to be mindful and have empathy and try and understand where a player is coming from. But the mental aspect is important. And I tell players consistently, it starts with routine, but most importantly, it comes down to the intrinsic motivation. What do you want to achieve in life, and how bad do you want it? And most importantly is, who are you doing it for? Yes, you do it for yourself, but we all got family and friends that are supporting us. And at the end of the day, my burning desire has always been to inspire.
Yeah, you certainly have inspired. And two things. I mean, as a South African loose head prop, the standard was set many years before you even put on the green and gold jersey. I mean, if I just look at your predecessors, whether it's an Oli Leroux, whether it's Osturant, this is what you've got to not just live up to, but exceed. And I think that talks to what you were mentioning about having to be even better. And then two, the skinniest pair of Springbok legs still belong hands down to Victor Matfield.
Oh man, yeah, I was fortunate, man. I had some great guys to look up, guys like Osterrand, you know, unbelievable players, and then you had Ole Leroux, Robbie Kemps, and unbelievable loosehead props. And you know, I wanted to be like them, and if not better. And the main thing came down to is that I wanted to clear my own path. I wanted to be different. I didn't want to play like Os. I didn't want to play like Oli Leroux. I wanted to be myself. And I remember, actually, we spoke about it at Shimmy recently on our podcast, Lessons from the Game, and we spoke about the captain's practice. For some reason, Brendan Fenton decided we should have 5 minutes full-on contact. And I was a youngster back then. I'm going to 2004. And I remember, like, okay, I was going easily into the contacts a day before the game, and Osterrand smokes me, but like properly. Listen, this man was a piece of prime beef. And I said, stuff that. I'm not taking this lying down. And I went right back at him and I smoked him again. And everyone was like, oh crap.
Yeah.
I think we should calm
You don't want
down.
to see Os upset. Huh?
Yeah. So yes, we are fortunate in South Africa. We got these unbelievable role models, which we can look up to from a rugby point of view. But it also allows you to have the platform so you can eventually create your own identity. We have seen that with Beast. We've seen that with Kitsy and with Ox as well.
Yeah, yeah. I love the fact that you played at the Cheetahs, and there's so many great props that came through there. We've mentioned at least two of them. I haven't, and you mentioned a Yanni du Plessis as well, coming through his ranks on the tight end side at the Cheetahs. There's some tough buggers that play in Bloemfontein, and I remember as a young lighty playing a club team from Bloem, running onto the field, and I know I look like one of the fat boys, but I played out wide. I played in the 13 jersey, and as we ran onto the field, I hear from a distance somebody say, "Kyk hierdie wit brood en botterseens," and I knew it was going to be the longest afternoon of my life. Are those the toughest buggers you've ever played with? Bloem, or would you say Pretoria? Who really showed you how tough you have to be to survive?
Well, that's a tough one. Obviously, I will shoot to the Bulls, but I think I need to tell the story in two parts because you need to give credit where credit is due. I had a great mentor, the Cheetahs, the legendary Tat Botha. He
Yeah,
guided
well,
me and
that
he helped me. He really looked after me. But playing rugby at uni at the Shimlers, we trained hard. We used to have what we call the pain time. It's the garden of pain. We had a S&C coach who was a former military, and like I mentioned earlier, we would do as warm up 2,200 meter sprints. Who does that? 2,200
yeah.
meter sprints. We would push the
And you
scrum
had
machine
Dougie
around the
Haymans
field.
at Schindler's as well, didn't you?
Yes, I'm coming to
Dougie
him.
Haymans?
Dougie, yeah,
Okay,
he helped me
okay.
out. He used to take myself and CJ van der Linde for training, for skills back in the day, before like doing scrum extras and individual skills actually existed. He did it because he wanted to help us. And I remember at scrum training back then, he's not this nonsense of crouch, bind, and sit, You would just crouch, boom, sit, and you go and violence, pure violence. And I remember going into Dougie Heyman's, oh man, it was a brick wall. He was hard, unbelievable. And I think maybe only once I moved him slightly, probably by 5 centimeters, and that felt like I won a World Cup. But coming back to the Cheetahs, we trained hard. That's why I learned work ethic, and it was great for me as well. Going to a hostel, and on top of that, a colored boy from Cape Town going to Afrikaans hostel in Bloemfontein was no joke. But I can tell you this, made some great friends there. But that's where I learned to stand my ground, to stand for my own values and be myself and be proud of my roots from where I come from as well. And on the side, next to our hostel, there was athletics track, and I would go there running. I would do sprints. I would broth. I was a man on a mission, and because I knew I didn't leave Cape Town just to get away from home and stay out past 12 at night. I came there for a reason. I had one job and one job only, and that was to become a professional rugby. And then accelerating forward to the Bulls. Wow. They that's where I really experienced tough times. Basil Karsus, Heineke Meyer. I will never forget those preseasons. I remember George preseason camp. A lot of people might not notice, but the Bulls, they would take away all the luxury. We would stay in the school hostel at Otoniqua. And you could bring your family. You would stay with your family in the hostel room. How crazy is
Wow,
that? But
wow.
training was so hard. And this one day, we ran a bleep test, or the beep test. Everyone was going, you had to read your PB. And then, like, everybody was proud. And Heineke looks at Basil. Basil, you happy? He's like, yeah, yeah, good. And we're like, okay, good, done. And Heineke just goes, let's do that again. We did a second bleep test. You had to come in at a certain time. If you didn't make it, you start over again. Finish the second
Oof.
one. And he looks at Basil. Happy with that? Let's do it again. And we went on like that. We ran 4 bleep tests. I've never experienced so much pain in my life. But what Heineke was
Yeah,
trying to install into us is resilience. You need to be able to go above and beyond when that big match moments or those big key moments arrive in the game. And you need to have the mental and physical capacity to still push forward. And that's what we did. We worked hard, we grinded. And I remember we would do training drills or fitness drills. We had to hit tackle bags and hit drills. And if you didn't give the right ball placement, it wouldn't count. You would just keep on going. And I think the Bulls, they are really like, we had the saying, we love it tough. We love it tough. And we would work hard. And that was driven by guys like Victor Matfield, Foridu Priya back in the Gary Botha. And they used to shout, we love it tough. And when we did fitness, if you were a prop, you didn't just run with the props. You wanted to run with the backs. You pushed your limits. You would never ever stay in your comfort zone. And that transferred to the Boks as well in 2007, to be 100% honest with you. The Bulls generation, that dynasty, you know, we are brothers forever. Even today, our WhatsApp groups are still going. And if I look back at now, I ran a Bronco test the other day. How crazy is that as a coach? Ran a 5:30. So stupid. But that resilience, that mindset with the Bulls, it carried on through the rest of my career. And honestly, if I didn't learn that resilience, like really leveled up my resilience, which I learned from the Bulls, I never would have achieved everything I did. And cheaters definitely played a part in my career. But I will tell you this, my brothers, the Bulls, the coaching staff, those guys really helped me, and sometimes I wasn't always where I was supposed to be. I was slightly overweight, slightly by 20 kgs, but you know what? I stayed in the fight and I came back.
Ask me, 20 kgs is nothing, man. Overnight you can pick up. I think it was Heineke who used to say something about tough times create tough people. I can't quite remember what his saying was, but he was definitely an advocate for that. Who's the toughest bagger you ever came across one-on-one? Who smoked you the hardest? I mean, you spoke about Dwayne and his impact on your arm, but if you look back, and it's a long career, Gurthro, who do you think is the toughest guy you've either played with or against?
Man, that's a tough one. Buckets is right up there, but luckily most of the time I was on his side, and when we would do opposition, he wouldn't be on the other side. But right up there was Owen Franks. We were talking about it the other day. It was pure violence. I won't say violence, but we had this badge of honor, and it's great to see the Springboks still have it. It's something that tends to be watered down in rugby, where you kind of forget what you're playing for. Why are you playing rugby? And yes, we were professional rugby players back in the day, but you played for that honor and you could feel it. Like if Owen Franks would come at you, he'd line you up, you would feel it solidly. And I
Yeah.
remember a few, but I think the biggest guy that scared me back in the day was Trevor Leota. I'll never forget. We played a warm-up game against him when I was still at the Cheetahs, and I hit him. I was like wanted to prove a point, and I smoked him, and he just looked at me like Trevor Leota. He looked like these mean cartoon character villains with these big eyes, and he's like, "You sure you want to do that?" I was like,
Ah.
"No, sir." I think I still said it off record. Sorry, Oom. I won't do that.
I think
But yeah,
I think at that
yeah.
point she was probably 135, almost 140 kilos. He was
Oh,
he
man.
he was a big piece of meat, that. But Gurthro,
Nah, but
let's move on. Because I can't keep you for too long, although I want to. From playing days into coaching, but before you coached, you obviously made the move to France. And back in the day, it wasn't something that happened as often as we see now. In fact, a lot of South African players didn't want to move overseas. And I remember speaking to Os Durant, who had received a massive offer from one of the French teams, and I don't want to speak out of turn. I think it was Montpellier, not 100% sure, and he opted to stay. He wanted to be on the blast with the family. Didn't want to leave the Free State because it was just not something that was done. And I think maybe there was a bit of a cultural thing as well that the guys found very difficult. But you managed to make that move. It was quite a leap, like I say, back in the day. Um, how did you decide France? Why did you decide France?
a lot of people ask me that question because if you think about it, why would you want to go play abroad if you're a player of year 2010 World Cup coming up in 2011? But at that stage, everything that I went through, the setbacks that I faced in 2009. And 2009 hit me bad. The amount of abuse that I experienced, it was tough. I asked myself some tough questions, and the humiliation that I experienced. But when I'll never forget playing 2010 at Newlands on my birthday and scoring that try against France. It was the start of something great. And even in the losing Springbok team, I had one job and one job only, and that was to give my best and inspire my teammates. And I'm very humbled by the fact that I was acknowledged in that way, getting Player of the Year. But then I asked myself this: okay, you have overcome these hardships, you've overcome this mental wall. What is next? So in my career as a rugby player, there were times I was in a comfort zone, and I'll acknowledge that today. I'm saying this. A lot of players are too proud to acknowledge that because it's about their ego. I don't have an ego. I want the youngsters listening to this podcast. The comfort zone is probably one of the biggest dangers that you'll ever be confronted in your life as a rugby player. So don't go there. When you're comfortable and when things get easy, that means you need to change something. You need to go harder. And I wanted a new challenge. I wanted to play in a different country. I wanted to be taken out of my comfort zone. I wanted to play in the European Cup. I wanted to win a top 14 in the European Cup. That was my goal. But also, I wanted to experience the French culture. I enjoyed France when I came here in my first in 2000 and then in 2007. And what I experienced, I said I definitely want to experience. But I also followed the French rugby, and it was interesting, and I saw the atmosphere. And it wasn't an easy choice. For me, it wasn't about the contract. For me, it was going after an experience, experiencing a different culture, and most importantly, I was chasing something. I wanted to win a title. I wanted to win a top 14 title. And that was on my checklist. And that's why it was so important. For me, it was tough leaving South Africa. Living in France now, I've been here for almost 14 years. South Africa is still my home. France is my adopted country. I remain a South African. I'll tell you this, the World Cup in 2023, I wanted to take a month leave. I was mentally drained. I was drinking my brandy out of my Springbok flask, and I was wearing my old Springbok jersey we used to wear under our number ones. It wasn't easy back then, just going to France. But I'll tell you this, it's probably one of the best decisions that I've made, because looking at my kids now and what they've experienced speaking 3 languages, we still speak Afrikaans at home. My kids speak English, they speak French fluently, it's their first language. And I'll tell you this, it sometimes a lot of people think it's easy living abroad. It's not. We're on our own. We have no family here. We have no support system here. For example, my daughter is doing French championships in a week's time in cheerleading, can you believe it? And we don't have anyone else staying with my son. So now there's a choice. Either my missus has to stay at home, or I have to drive back all the way to Toulouse to stay with my son. That's what people don't get. People think, okay, you're living in France. It's easy. It's not easy. Life is hard, but like anywhere else in the world. But I think very important for all the listeners and the viewers, South Africa remains my home, and that's who I am, and that will never change.
Yeah, you can take the South African out of South Africa, but you can't take the South Africa out of you. And these are the type of lessons I think that anybody who's listening and is joining us now, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe. Well, here, if you do tune into lessons from the game, because Gurthro speaks about a lot of these things with a lot of people that he's played with, against, maybe not even faced before. And I caught the one with Shimmy as well, and it was so awesome to see some of the pictures from you guys at the Cheetahs days, and Shimmy looking skinny. I'm gonna give him all sorts of hell for that. I'd forgotten he was once he was once a lightweight hooker. It's unbelievable when you think about it. But you played for 2 separate teams in France as well. And the one thing I appreciate about French rugby is that the support is extreme. If you're a Toulouse fan, you're a Toulouse fan. The families is a Toulouse fan. And then you went to Paris as well towards the end of your career. that must have been a very different culture. Yes, you're in the same country, but depending on where you are, if you're in the South, different game, different expectation, different fans. Whereas I found in Paris, not that rugby isn't big, but that there's so much happening in Paris that it can get lost in the melee. It's one of those things I remember from 2007 World Cup, is you could walk down the Champs-Elysees and not know that there's a Rugby World Cup on because there's a massive poster of Thierry Henry. France has got so much happening that in Paris it seemed like you had to seek out the rugby. That must have been an interesting lesson for you as well. You'd already settled in France, you already knew the language, you already played the game, but then to experience the Crow culture within the French culture must have been really interesting.
Definitely, Toulouse was special. Toulouse fans are unbelievable. You know, the atmosphere is amazing, and I'm experiencing this now as a coach as well in La Rochelle. The French supporters are fanatical, and they live and breathe rugby. Even today, when I go back to Toulouse, it's like I just played yesterday. People are constantly stopping you and asking for a photo, having a chat, and I really do appreciate that and appreciate all their support through the years. And also, just acknowledge, I will say thanks to everybody in Toulouse because when I stopped playing, it was quite tough and quite intense. Getting all my projects into place, getting everything launched, and there were sponsors of the club that were helping me, and companies helping me to get my team building sessions or going. But anyway, the big difference for me was when I went to Stade Français, like you said, there was no rugby vibe. There wasn't this massive rugby culture in terms of the city. It was completely different. But what I've learned there as well is to also to appreciate that. And that was also different because you can't just rely on the support. You can't just rely on the fans. That's where you have to dig deep and you got to pitch up for your teammates. And that was also a tough time for me because my contract came to an end with Toulouse. I didn't get my extension. That was a big lesson that I've learned. When
Yeah.
you get a 2+1 contract, doesn't mean you have the option on the last year. The club has the option on the last year. And if they decide they want to keep you and you agree, then you can stay. And nobody told me that. So that was a massive surprise when I got that 2+1. So obviously Toulouse, and understand the decision they made. We were a lot of old guys there, but I still wanted to go on. And before going to Stade Francais, I had like 10 offers. That was great. It's going to be easy. But slowly but surely, those offers just disappeared.
Yeah.
And I found myself stuck in my garage, my little home gym, every morning, waking up, hitting the weights, doing my rower, training hard, with the hope of getting a last opportunity to say farewell to rugby. And there was a stage I didn't think it was going to happen. And then I got the opportunity at Stade Francais. So for me, I was grateful. I knew that was my last chance, the way things were going. And I was fortunate enough to share that with guys like Willem Alberts, Mornay Stay, Charles
You're
McLeod.
right.
It was brilliant. And I'll never forget this. When I got there, people like I saw the coach, he was just shaking his head. He's too old. Il est trop vieux. And I'm like, okay. And then we go to the gym. They said, okay, gee, you don't have to do the squats, your knees, your back, your age. I'm like, stuff that. Give me that bar. And I squatted, put on my belt, went all the way down. And when we did fitness, I was killing it. I didn't even have a preseason, but I was fitter than the players that did the whole preseason. But then came the real test. I had to run a Bronco, but on my own. No one else, just me and the SNC coach. And just it just, gee, this is gonna be the icebreaker. They want to know if you still have the ability to run. And I remember running on my own, Jean Boin, there in Paris. And I knew if I don't make this Bronco count, I'm done. And I think at the age of 36, I ran 4 minutes and 56 seconds, which a lot of modern day props would beat. And whether I was fit or not, or just the fear of not getting a contract. And but yeah, it was different. And a little anecdote. Eventually, my stint came to an end. Was a medical joker for months, and back then the director was Robert Moore, and he told
Yep.
me, "Gee, you're done. We're looking for someone younger now. Thanks for your service. Really appreciate that. And that was tough to hear. And then
Mm.
I think about, well, that was 2017. 4 years later, he was the director at Rochelle, and he said, "G, do you want to become Scrum coach?" And I was like,
Man, that's
"No."
unbelievable. Before we hit on what we actually are meant to be talking about, and I let you go, and that's what we can anticipate between the Boks and Le Bleu. Your first coaching stint, was that at PAL, if I'm remembering
No, my first
correctly?
coaching
Where
stint was actually at, I started professionally at Colomiers, but also I started out
Yes.
in Federal 1, which was in Lille, just outside of Paris. I was doing
Right.
consulting over there. And then I got the opportunity in Pro D2 with Colomiers. And then after that, after an Instagram live, Jono Gibbs contacted me and asked if I would be interested. And then obviously Robert Moore, he went on to the next step. So yeah, I put in the hard yards. I was coaching in amateur rugby as well. I was putting it in.
Yeah, no, and that's another lesson that we learned from Robbie Fleck just last week, who was obviously the Stormers coach and just won the Varsity Cup with UCT, that there is no end to the journey just because you've lost the big job or you've lost the big contract. There's more to this rugby thing. And if it means you go back and coach at school, then you go back and coach at school. You're still imparting knowledge. And it's as important what happens with under 18s and under 17s as what happens with senior national rugby players. And that's always fascinated me. I think Swayster Brain also said something similar as well, that just because I'm not coaching at the highest level doesn't mean that the journey is over. And I absolutely love that. But let's get into the internationals, because I know we're going to run out of time, and I do want to release you. You're a working man. I mentioned right up front that the Springboks have got a match against France later in the year. The All Blacks play them 3 times. So that is at least 5 occasions that the Southern Hemisphere duo will face that French Le Bomb squad. And it's very interesting. I love the fact that they went with a 7-1 because it means that Rassie has led the way. But Gurthrö is a very good coach. Um, French have got a lot of strength, a lot of depth, a lot of very talented players. How do you see it pan out over the next couple of years in the lead up to 2027? Do you think that the biggest threat to the Springboks, and I'm putting it bluntly, do you think that the Boks' biggest threat is France rather than the All Blacks, let's say?
Well, if you have to look at the competition, the top 14 today is probably the toughest competition in the world. Every week you got international players on the team sheet, not just French, but foreign players. You got New Zealand, the South Africans, Australians, English players. The competition is unbelievable. It's intense. And the season's long. You got 26 games in a season, just in the top 14 without the playoffs. And then you got the Champions Cup as well. So you got 30 plus games in there, and sometimes up to 35. The season is unbelievably long. What I do feel that has helped the French as well is that having all the foreign-based players in the league has helped them to evolve, has made them stronger, has forced them to look at things differently. But now they've taken it to another level as well. They brought in the GIF system. So that is all the French development players, making sure that they get preference when it comes to team selection. That needs to be respected. But France, where it will be tough for them is especially facing the All Blacks. I don't know if they're going to be sending a full strength side or strong side. I think that's tough. It's very tough at the end of a top or French season to go play international rugby, because the guys are really giving it their best. We have 4 games left in the season before the playoffs. We are really starting to manage some of our top players because they are cooked. And if you don't do that, and it's not just physically, mentally, they are cooked. So I think it's going to be tough for the French to really feel the tough side. I think they will be targeting those November test matches because that's where you have everybody at full strength. And I think it's tough, the fact that not all the seasons are 100% aligned. Where does that put South Africa? To be honest with you, I don't know. I think what South Africa is doing at the moment, you're looking at the blend of youngsters coming through. You still see that rugby is still strong in South Africa. The amount of players coming through, the quality of players. Rugby is the religion in South Africa. It's not a sport, and people need to understand that. And then combine that with the players that are playing abroad. I think it's a great blend. And I know there are a lot of critics in terms of everybody should be playing at home, everybody
Yeah.
should be in South Africa. Everybody's got their own opinion. I'm not here to discuss that. But I do believe what will continue to help South Africa is that rugby is more than just a game. We live in a country that is still healing, even though it's years on, still healing, and we need
Yeah.
people to inspire. And players know when they wear that Springbok jumper that they become part of something greater than themselves. And players want to wear that jersey. It's everything. And that will
Yeah.
always set South Africa apart from any other rugby nation.
Yeah, it's so fascinating when you talk about the challenges of playing towards the back end of a top 14 season rather. It can be, and I can imagine injuries will still happen. There'll be other things that will impact Fabian Gutierrez's team. I see Piato Malvaca has been ruled out for the long term.
Yeah.
That's one of the hookers, one of the people who made that Le Bomb squad tick. And I do wonder if maybe we'll see a slightly different approach, because the All Blacks are certainly not going to go in with the equivalent of a bomb squad. Do you think there's any thought of revenge? Not necessarily revenge. I know that it's said so often that the French will look at what happened in the World Cup, knowing that they should have, could have won it, to lose to the Springboks by a point. That heartbreak, I'm sure, still carries some weight. Do you think there's a little bit of a thought of, we need to prove to ourselves that we can beat these guys, that we can take them on at their game and actually win?
Now, I'll be honest with you, during the World Cup, I was kind of torn in two because, being a coach here in France, we are,
Yeah.
are developing our players to play for the French team. I was academy coach as well, but also a South African. So, at the end of the day, I remained a South African, and it was quite tough. I really felt for them. But what I can tell you this is that all the effort that they've invested and the time, the money, the amount of money is actually crazy. I can't speak figures, but the amount of money that was invested to that World Cup campaign was next level. And they were 100% sure that they were going to win it. And post World Cup, I can tell you this. In French, we say le jour était marqué. So the players, they were really strucken down by that defeat. That was unbelievably tough. Mentally, it scarred them. Revenge, not sure if they'll go for revenge. I think they will definitely give the best. I think it'll be very important. You can call it revenge. The French are very passionate, but I also are very intelligent, and that they know that when it comes to only playing with emotion, that's when you're no longer lucid. You're not making the right decisions. But I can tell you this. The players are still hurting from that defeat in the quarterfinal against the Boks. It's still some of the players have been affected. Some players post World Cup, they never managed to recover and regain their top form. And a lot of them went through some tough times, dip in performance. So that's going to be a tough one. But you also got to keep in mind, the Boks are going to have to be ready because the French, they then at the start of their season, they had their break. The championship starts in September. So the guys are fresh. They're only not even halfway through the season. So they'll definitely be targeting that game. So, we talk about rugby. Rugby is a spectacle. We won't be seeing a spectacle. We'll be seeing a full-on war gladiator style. And those are one of the games you want to get out your brandy, your popcorn, your braai, everything. You want to be ready. You want to be sitting down. Make sure everything is prepped so you can be fully focused on that game.
Yeah, look, I don't want to tell anyone that Springboks All Blacks isn't important. It definitely is important. It's still the biggest match for a South African rugby fan, I think. But I think this year's tussle between France and South Africa is, if we're going to watch one test match this year, that's the one. And Gurthy, I know I'm about to let you go, But I've got an old face for you, somebody that you'll recognize. I think has joined us. He's been part of the show before, and maybe he's got a question before I do let you go. I have one more question as well. There he is.
Brother.
There's the man.
Hey, he
We're
hasn't
all
aged
getting
a bit.
old.
He hasn't aged a
Oh,
bit, man.
it's the hair. He's still got
Good to
hair.
see
That's
you,
why.
man. Good to see you.
No, Gurthro's just saying I haven't gotten old because I've still got the hair, but like, don't worry, everything else is yes, it's all gone. Eh? Yeah,
Where's the
it's just
notebook,
one of
man? I
those.
always remember you with your notebook at Loftus
I
waiting
know,
there.
I know,
Hey,
I know.
tell me what happened in the game. There, just waiting for that side comment. I'm like, leave me alone, man.
Listen, I'm finally trying this, this video thing out. It only took like a couple of decades, but I'm getting there. You know what I'm saying? But Jesus, good to see you. I can't remember the last time we had a proper chat. It might have been in 2007. The hotel room in which you guys were celebrating the victory. I think Os caught us talking, and he kind of like came into the conversation, and he was like still trying to give you words of encouragement about what to be like going forward, so that you wouldn't be
Yeah.
stuck behind someone like him or whatever it was. But obviously, I mean, your journey into France has been quite interesting, especially all of that stuff. Actually, I'm more interested in your training. I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of that.
Yeah, man, just trying to stay fit, that's part of the journey that I'm on. I'm not training for aesthetics or anything like that. Clearly, I'm not going to have a six pack. I've given up on that dream ages ago. I'll rather focus on drinking the six pack. So, that's for me, it's something personal, being strong, fit, and focused. Because being a full-time rugby coach now, the mental load, the pressure that we go through, it's so important to take care of yourself and maintain that balance and just for your mental health. So that's why I pitch up. I practically train every day. And I always laugh with my colleagues. They say, gee, you're training like 6, 7 times a week, but we're not seeing the difference. I said, well, I'm not training to look different. I'm training to feel different.
No, it's really, really superb. And you still function like a young man, Gurthro. Before I really do let you go, there was an article that I saw you quoted in, and you're talking about the scrums and how referees are listing a lot of cheating, skullduggery that's happening. It's I think it was a month ago, and I think that's always been the case. I think that the dark arts are lost somewhat on people who don't necessarily operate there on a full-time basis. Do you think it's getting worse?
Do you sure you want me to go? Because this can last another hour and a half here. um,
Maybe I do
now,
have
to
to
be
go.
honest, that was the interview, I think, back then with Rugby Pass, and some of the words got taken a bit out of context, but there is a lot of deliberate cheating going on. And I'll be dead honest here. We had this chat with Owen Franks as well on my podcast, Lessons from the Game. And we spoke about back then, it was about that badge of honor, about overpowering your opponent. And you would accept it when you got a hiding. After that, you would have a beer together and you would have a chat. And we really respected each other, and that mutual respect we had for each other as opponents. And today, it's appalling. Myself being a full-time scrum coach, I've got to prepare my players how to counteract cheat tactics, how to counter a tight end that's deliberately cranking. We're talking about player safety. We brought in the break foot to help stability and protect the players. But seriously, it's a joke. It's a joke. It's a freaking circus. But I will tell you this, referees are working hard behind the scenes to spot out this treachery and get rid of these villains and send these criminals to jail. So they are really working hard behind the scenes. In France, sorry, I got carried away there. In France, uh, in France, we actually have visios, we call it Zoom calls, and where we have all the refs online. We're going through specific clips, giving a checklist, and now they're starting to call out these players are cheating, which is great. So the referees, especially in France, from their side, they are definitely making the effort. They're having a lot of chats with scrum coaches. Scrum coaches are collaborating, but there's a responsibility on the coaches, the way they educate their players and the way they coach their players. And there's a responsibility on the players. If you are cheating, that means you are copying out. If you are collapsing a scrum, that means you're not fit enough, you're not strong enough. So if you want to cheat, go play a different sport where that is allowed and where it's part of the game. Sorry, I'm getting carried away, but it's important. If we want the scrum to remain a fair contest and remain relevant in the game of rugby, we need to take responsibility. Every single one of us. The referees are definitely making the time for that and taking responsibility, doing their best, because they're only human beings. They can't always see what the specialists are seeing. But same goes for rugby players and for coaches, because the scrum's an integral part of the game. You know, it's a battle out there. And you got to ask yourself this question. Do you want to get a pat on the back from your teammates because you earned their respect, you won that penalty through honor? Or do you want a pat on the back and you know you actually didn't do anything, you just cheated? So it comes down to core values, doesn't it?
And also the scrum is under a little bit of pressure at the moment. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about how World Rugby is seemingly trying to look at alternatives, trying to almost negate the scrum in certain aspects of the game. But I love your passion, Gurthro. I think the last time I saw you angry was outside. It wasn't Mystic Boer. It was on the other side of the hotel. What was that? What was that club on the upstairs, on the opposite
I
the
never went
varsity?
out when I was a player, man.
I'm gonna remember. I'm gonna remember. But for some, I don't know if you have any last questions. I've kept Gurthro on for longer than I intended to, and I am going to let
Nah,
him
I'm
go.
good.
But I don't know if you got one more question also.
Look, I mean, I'll sort of risk it by asking you another Scrum question. Well, on behalf of Julian, for you, these are obviously very, very good scrums. Both sides, both teams have very good scrums. What for you sort of make the two teams? I'm pretty sure they arrive at the same conclusion in different ways. You know, if you've watched how Dan Heeman trains the Boks, and you obviously know how the French boys train. For you, sort of like when you look at the two scrums, obviously they're both good scrums. What is it that kind of makes them such good scrums to to play against, and how is it that they get there?
So are we talking specifically about the Boks and the French team, or is there a specific team
Well,
just in
the
general?
Boks and the French, because that's probably the two on. I mean, look, I mean, I don't want to disrespect anybody else, but I would say that's, if you think scrums today in today's game, that's probably the two sort of best packs, if you really want to call it that.
Look, if it comes down to the anchor of the scrum, and if you look at it, you got Winnie Antonio on the one side and Frans Mulhero on the other side. You know, it comes down to having those powerhouses. I think there's there's clearly different coaching philosophies as well, but in France the scrum is everything. You know, you even have the crowd cheering when there's a scrum. They shout pousse, and no, that is not the swear word what you guys are used to in Afrikaans. That means push, push, push. All right, so just need to be clear on that. But I think where the difference comes, and you always need a point of difference, because you got players that are world class. They train to perform in the scrum. They train to dominate in the scrum. But what I like about Don Heeman is the way he coaches, because it's deeper. Is what does it mean to you? What does it mean to you to go forward? You are not just pushing through an all black pack or a French pack. You are pushing forward because behind you got a nation that needs you to create momentum. And I think that is the point of difference. At the end of the day, we all analyze the scrum. We all doing drills. We're all training to perform. But I do believe when you have two packs like that facing each other head on, it comes down to how bad do you want to dominate your opponent? How bad do you really want to make them suffer? And I think that's what's going to be the key when we see the showdown in November.
Ja, nou kyk, Gurthrö, daai tipe taal gebruik is net op die blou kant, dink ek.
It
Ja.
needs pushing just
I know you'll get into more trouble than me. No, but it really is. And the one question I didn't ask earlier, because we sort of flew into the internationals, is the depth of players that France has been able to build in the last decade, 15 years. Because I think it was very clearly in terms of numbers, and you look at the number of professional registered players. England has always had a lot of numbers. South Africa, I always felt was second, but it's almost like you blink, you rub your eyes out, and all of a sudden, France is able to put together multiple options. Maybe they can put out two different test squads. Is that your sense at the moment, that the depth is really starting to come through now?
I think massively. If you think in the past, it was kind of like we say in French, abusé. We had they were kind of like abusing the system, recruiting foreign players. They just wanted the best players. But then the French changed. They want to develop their players. Like, for example, you want to make sure you have a hooker that is French or a fly-off that is French. They were really focusing on that with their GIF system. And they put a lot of thinking and planning into the development of French players. Even when I was academy coach, you would have this long list of, won't say rules, but kind of like protocols to follow with the French players. So it's ridiculous. If you look at Toulouse, if you look at which we call the Espoir team, which is their under 20 team or under 21 team, they've got a squad of 60 players. And these guys are training like professionals. When I was academy coach 2 years ago, we had a squad of about 45 players. We had a full-time S&C, someone that's responsible for return to play. We've got a video analyst. It's full on. And what clubs are currently doing in France is they are replicating their style of play with the first team. So it will filter down all the way to the younger teams. And especially if we look at teams like Toulouse, if you look at the women's team, the younger teams, they all play exactly like Toulouse. It's part of their DNA. And that's something we're also trying to replicate at La Rochelle. But the pool of players they have here in France is unbelievable, because some players really see it as an opportunity, as a job, so they can actually become a proper profession for them. And for some of them, they don't have anything else. And I do believe it's not the same in terms of what we experience in South Africa. I think in South Africa, some players are a bit worse off in a sense, they really want it. But France has this huge amount of players and talented players, because some of them are skillful when it comes to football, and they're playing different sports too. But I think the main thing is their burning desire, to win the bouclier and to win that Champions Cup, and everybody just wants to be part of that culture of the club, because the club identity is quite intense here in France. Whether it's La Rochelle, Toulouse, Brive, Colomiers, Clermont, people are passionate here.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. And I think La Rochelle has done so well. I know that Raymond Rule called it a day not too long ago. And that's sad to see that it was sort of forced by injury. But it was so wonderful to see him have a go, gain a different measure of confidence. And I think I could probably say the same about Dylan Lates as well. Just the type of rugby that you see these guys play. They've always had the talent, they've always had the wheels and the skill and this, but there is a certain level, I think, of confidence that, and maybe it's that moving away from home and having to make it happen yourself. I don't know what it is, Gurthrö. Do you think it's got a little bit to do with that? And hopefully we'll see one or two more South Africans don the La Rochelle jersey in the next season or two as well again.
Yeah, I think firstly, credit to Raymond. Firstly, congratulations to him on an unbelievable career. The part he played in our two Champions Cup titles were unbelievable. He's a massive influence on the team, not only on the field, but off the field, just for being the person that he is. And Dylan as well. I believe Dylan, he was playing so well a few years ago. I was like really hoping for him to be in the Springbok team. And today he's a lead in our team. At times he's been captain of our side, which has been really great. But I think the main thing is for us with players coming over. It comes down to what I said earlier and why I left back then as well, is getting out of your comfort zone. You're coming to a new country, new teammates, learn the language. You really sometimes like you feel like you don't know anybody, you got no friends. You got to earn your stripes again. You got to start from scratch. I always use the example of Cheslin Colby. When he was in South Africa, he was always playing well, but never really on the radar for the Springbok team. And then he came to Toulouse, and then it's like something just freed him up, or maybe it was being away from his, how can I say, entourage, or just that comfort zone. We know, like when you're home in South Africa, you got your family around you, your friends around, you always got stuff to do. But when you're in a foreign country, you only got your partner or your kids and rugby. And then rugby is really the main thing. As a foreigner, you don't got sponsorship deals and photo shoots and all these type of things, and taking photos so you can show your six pack. Obviously, the props, we were never invited to those photo shoots, but maybe that will change as time, seeing that we're talking about our feelings and stuff these days. So, anything is possible. But it clearly comes down to getting out of your comfort zone. I'm a firm believer of that, going from your comfort zone into that fear zone so that you can eventually go into that growth zone.
Yeah, I've got a real fan question here, Julian. And I don't know if I should ask a prop about a scrum half, but there's been so much made of Dupont and his just his sheer ability over the last couple of seasons. And he really is a game changer, single-handedly can turn things around. With him there versus without him there, if you were to put the two teams, France, South Africa, on the field, without him today, as things stand, do you think that the French would be able to cope, or how big is his impact really? And I know I'm asking a prop.
No, his impact is definitely massive because he sees things on the field. He reminds me of Fourie Dupré back in the day. Fourie Dupré could anticipate certain things. He knew exactly what was going to happen when, and the connection between him and Brian Abana was unbelievable back in the day. They knew exactly what was going on in the mind of the other one. And I do believe that Dupont has that feeling. In French, we say sensibilité. So he's got that feeling for the game. And that's something which I believe some players have and some don't. He can see everything happening like at slow pace while it's happening at the lightning speed for the rest of the guys around him. But it definitely has a massive impact. But I do believe that the French team has evolved that, yes, Dupont adds a different edge, the same as Ntamak when he is playing, adds a completely different edge to the team. But you have seen the other players step up. We have recently seen Maxime Luku, the reserve number 9, step up. Recently having a great game as well in the Six Nations, doing well. We've seen Tom Ramos step up at number 10, which was quite interesting. And he was actually doing really well. So the players now are way more experienced, and it's a new generation that is used to winning. It's a new generation that is way more confident. They no longer see themselves as the underdog. They know that they're right up there as one of the top teams in the world. So coming back to your question, Dupont, will it have an impact on them? Yes, in certain areas. But all the work which the French coaching staff has put into place and the culture they have created and the leaders that they have developed. You had guys like Greg Aldridge stepping up as captain recently as well. And just the amount of players, the leadership they have, it's unbelievable. So with Dupont not being there, it will have an impact. But I do believe it's not the end of the world. If you have to maybe look back to the quarter final, was it the right call to play him if he wasn't 100%? I think the French are debating that quite a bit post World Cup.
Yeah, that's very interesting because he was coming back from an injury. It felt very Andre Hubert 1995 with the glove. I don't know if it was just me. Very, very crucial it seemed for the outcome, and maybe it was more about the personality being there and more about the emotion that it lends to the audience as well than the actual play. Yeah, any more questions for Gurthro?
Yeah, look, listen, Gurthro, as long as is it Le Garec?
Nolan Lagarek, he's also there in the mix
Yeah,
as well. Really great.
as long as he's not playing or pretending to be hurt like a footballer like he has recently, I think the French have a nice chance. Um, but look, I mean, just looking at that game, I know it's an incredibly tough game. I don't know which hat you would wear if you were to pick a winner when that game finally comes around. Who would your guy be?
Oh. But honestly, that's a tough one because, as I mentioned earlier before you came on, that the French were really emotionally scarred after that defeat in the quarterfinal. That game is everything to them. They've been planning for that game for quite a while now, and I can tell they're going to definitely target it. And will it be revenge? I don't think so, because it will more come down to, for them as a group, preparing for the World Cup to showcase that they still are that team that they used to be before the World Cup in 2023. And it's going to come down to players, proving them for themselves that they can exist against the best team in the world. But then again, what I always tell experts in the game, but know way more than what I do, South Africans are different. When you think we're not going to pitch up, we will surprise you and give you a smack on the face, which you thought you didn't deserve, but you'll get it anyway because we think you deserve it. And they just pitch up because it's in our blood. It's part of our DNA. If you look at the change that has happened in our country in South Africa after 2 World Cups, no politician has had that impact since Madiba. Nobody has that amount of impact on a country. Seeing people from different backgrounds supporting the Boks, inspiring, and I do believe it's subconsciously having a massive impact on our country, and hopefully it will also inspire leaders, to really reach out. When I spoke to Babalwa recently, I was shocked to hear what was happening in South Africa. Yeah, in terms of women, in terms of their needs, you have to choose between a loaf of bread and your personal products. It's ridiculous. But then again, you got condoms flowing freely in South Africa where you can get access to it, which is ridiculous. So, but coming back to your questions, South Africa as something which is completely different. And we've come through tough times. We've been isolated for so long. And now we have players that is representing a nation. And they know how important that is for every single human being that they're representing in the country. And when that game comes, it's not going to be a rugby game. It's going to be a war.
And who's winning that war?
gonna-
Who's winning?
Oh, it's going to be a tough one. But, seeing what Rusty is creating at the moment, the depth in the squad, if I have to put on my coach's hat here for a moment, the depth he's creating, the culture that is created, the inclusive culture, which is unbelievable, and the amount of young blood coming through. And you know what? If you look at the guy, the players that he chooses, it's not just about winning games. He's preparing for another World Cup. He's creating a new generation. And if I have to call it, still a long way to go, but if I have to call it, I would go with South Africa because they know what is coming. And South Africans want to make sure that they continue to assert their authority.
Coach G, you're an absolute legend. Make sure if you're watching this to catch lessons from the Game podcast, some wonderful conversations, some great rugby conversations that Gurthro has on an ongoing basis. And if you didn't have a look, were wondering who to look out for, who to support, maybe even in top 14, well, there you go. We had the La Rochelle Scrum coach here, and maybe you can, give them a little bit of a shout, a bit of support, a bit of a push. Gurthro, I can't wait to see you back home. I know, though, with the Champions Cup, you were not too long ago in the country. So hopefully we'll see you back home soon. If not, catch you at a test match. You're a legend. Thanks so much for your time.
No, guys, thanks for having it. Was really great to see you. And also to both of you, thanks for all the amazing chats through the years. So great to see you, man. It's funny not to see you with your little notebook there and writing everything down. But, you know, it'd be great to catch up with you at a later stage. And also to all my fellow South Africans listening and watching. You know, thank you for all your years of support and still continuing to support me. And if I can leave you guys with this one message is this: remember, this belief drives behavior. You believe in something, your attitude will determine your altitude. Thanks, guys.
Au revoir, Coach G.
Au revoir. À bientôt.
It was really good to see the man. He still looks the same. I think he's looked 40 since he was 25.
You know, this is the thing, I guess. Yeah, I I find it insane that that Gurthrö became this coach that he is. You know, he's like, I mean, he's the proper coach. You know, listening to that
Yeah.
message now, you know, like his entire life is invested in, you know, it's like in teaching. You know, practically every bit of conversation in what he says, you know, is like a teachable moment for him. I find that like I remember having to interview him in the old days, and you didn't get a lot from him. But you know, now he's got so much more to say, and I guess you can always credit that to you know what he was saying about getting out of South Africa and learning a bit more about about the world, and just learning to be comfortable in your own skin, to say, you know, we all have something to say, and you
Yeah.
know, if it goes unsaid, it's a complete waste of everyone's time. You know what I mean? So it was good to see him
Yeah.
though. Sorry about my
It's very
voice.
good.
I've got like the starts of a cold, so
Mm.
it's starting to mess with my voice first, and I'm sure the rest of me will be done tomorrow. So.
No, but I thank you for jumping on to wrap this up with us, and yeah, to get involved with Gurthro there. We are definitely gone over an hour, which is fantastic. So let's quickly take you talk about lessons learned. Boy, did we learn some lessons in the URC. So let's wrap it up by taking a look at some of what's happening there. And one of the big things for me, shocked me to see the Irish teams all go down, the South African teams all win. But I don't want to make too much of it from a South African point of view. I'm more fascinated about the Irish teams because, yes, URC is important, but for a lot of the European teams, a top 8 place, even if you don't win this thing, is more important because they want to get into the Champions League. And all of a sudden, those results from last weekend mean that there you see Munster going down to Cardiff, probably really unexpected. Scarlets beating Leinster, probably one of the biggest upsets of the weekend. The Sharks doing very well against Ulster. It means that the log positions for the Irish teams are going to possibly be impacted by what we saw this week, and for them not to make the Champions Cup. I know it's not as big for us, but for them it's a huge thing. It feels like it's going to cost them.
Yeah, look, I think it's one of those things that'll fix themselves over the next 2 rounds. You know, the final 2 rounds before the quarterfinals. So if you look at Leinster, yes, they lost to Scarlets, which if you say you saw that coming, then you're lying. But
Yeah.
you can explain why it happened, because they went on that trick again of playing, you know, a mixture of their second and third string
Like a
players,
sneaky.
a bit like they did against a bit like they did against the Bulls and lost. So it's kind of like a similar thing. And so they probably weren't quite on it. But if you look at the result, I mean, looking at the log now, you know, they've managed to lose that game, and they lost, you know, the one against the Bulls. They are still 2 full wins ahead of Glasgow. That's in that second, which basically means in all likelihood they're not going to get toppled, even though they've got something else to play this weekend, which is obviously the Champions Cup semi-final. So I don't think it's a problem for them. But then I think the bigger issue is, so you've got two Welsh sides in the top 8 at the moment, the way things are, and the Welsh sides are basically down here to play. You know, the Welsh sides are basically down down to play here in South Africa, and they don't have a great record of winning in South Africa, and they're going to do that over the next sort of 2 weeks or 2 rounds. Let me say 2 rounds because they're not playing this weekend. But when that happens, I think with their record traveling to South Africa, which is not great, you'll probably find 1 or 2 more of the Welsh sides falling off. And obviously elsewhere, you'll find, the Irish sides picking up a bit of, you can get the Irish sides picking up a few positions. So I actually think they'll be fine. It's just where it is at the moment. And also what they'll try and do is to make sure that they get over the line. And I think when they want to get over the line, they can. For me, the great game for that was Ulster against the Stormers, where it was basically whoever won was going to break into the top 8. And they managed to get it done, even though I think they went down 19-0 or something silly like that. And so, look, I won't lie. I think the Irish sides will be okay.
And then the one team I do want to ask you before we do wrap it up completely, Glasgow Warriors going down to the Bulls last weekend. I made a big deal about the 2 South African coaches. I made a big deal about Franco Smith and the sort of the rematch of the grand final from last season. And I think I probably expected a little bit more from Glasgow. I don't know. Are they a fading force? Are the Bulls just finding form? What was that about?
Look, it's always a bit of both. We in punditry, I think one of the things that happens is there's so much is put on results. Like if a team wins, then they've got the golden nugget. They know, they've got life by the tail almost. And if they lose, they're the worst. The truth is always somewhere in the middle. So my thing would be, actually, don't stress about it. I wouldn't say they're a fading force, but you do have to take context into things. And the first bit of context is, I think they were missing something like 10 of the guys that played in that final. You missed that many guys, you're not going to be the same team. That's the first part. And the second part was the Bulls actually were very good. The really incredible thing about the Bulls in that game was basically their defense. The Bulls' defense for me has always been an iffy thing. If you look at the Bulls, where they're strong is they've got good set piece and they can attack. The one thing they've worked really hard on since Jake White has been there is their attack. So they're a very good attacking team, and they're a very good team in terms of in terms of set piece. But the issue has always been, they can score points, but they can't stop them. It's a bit like playing Brazil in the old days, where it's like, no, it's fine, we'll just score more than you do. So that's always been a problem for the Bulls. But I think on this tour, in 3 of their 4 matches, obviously the exception being Edinburgh, where they lost, in 3 of their 4 matches, I think the defense was the standout sort of aspect of their game. So, to answer the question, it is a bit of both. Glasgow has got, it's got a bit of a juggling act in terms of, getting their best possible players. If you look at a guy like Henko Venter, having that lengthy band because of the eye gouging, that guy is one of the most underrated players, because he does the dirty work. He's a physical guy. He's powerful. He's strong. He runs into the teeth of the defense, and he just does the hard stuff, and he does it particularly well. You miss a guy like that. I know it's only one guy, but you miss a guy like that. You've got somebody who's maybe not quite doing it, because you've also got to look at, you talk about, South African coaches. Let's go to Franco Smith. Who are Franco Smith's lieutenants in that team? Probably a fair bit of the South African boys, especially amongst the forwards, because they and only they understand the challenge of playing against a South African team almost sort of intrinsically, as opposed to, it's like that whole thing with Bane in Batman, when somebody talks about Batman. I was born in the dark, you merely visited type vibes, So a lot of the opposition sort of forwards, when they're playing against our forwards, what they do is, they know they've got to visit the dark. If you get a Henko Venter in amongst them, that guy, was born in it too, so he knows how to navigate in those, in that murky underworld, as it were.
Yeah, and I think our guy in the back, Paul's got some fixtures for Champions Cup. So we've got those Euro fixtures just to confirm. You mentioned semi-finals. That is the business end, and it's pretty big ones as well, with Leinster up against the Saints and Bordeaux against Stade Toulouse. It's a bit disappointing to see two French teams go up against each other for the neutral, but then again, we could have seen an all-French final here. I'm
It's probably the best,
don't
yeah.
know.
It's
I don't
probably
see
the
an
best thing to happen. That way,
yeah,
it feels a bit balanced, because you could quite easily. I mean, those are the top two teams, aren't they, in the top 14, which is Bordeaux and Toulouse. So if you had them playing, like either of the other two teams, you could easily have had an all French final. Um, it shows, obviously, whose rugby is currently the strongest in terms of club rugby. You've seen it in the Champions League in football. Sometimes suddenly you've got two German sides, Dortmund and Bayern, or you've got Italian sides, Juventus, AC Milan, or it has happened before. It does happen, and it does showcase, obviously, who's currently got the strongest league on the go. But I just think, from a perspective of sort of the neutrals, it's probably not entirely a bad thing to see a French team against somebody else, probably Leinster. And of course,
yeah,
Leinster going for like a hat trick of hopefully finally, getting over the line, because they lost the last two finals, which is insane.
right.
Like that kind of luck is just so bad. But anyway, we'll see what happens this weekend. Should be fun though.
Yeah, I do think maybe it is their opportunity as well. And of course, in the second tier Challenge Cup as well, also onto the business end. And, the Sharks, I think, probably, again, I keep saying South African teams don't seem to pay too much credence to this. And it is one of those juggling acts that we simply have to do. We can't always play our best teams when it comes to these cup competitions. And we have to put our eggs in the URC basket. And it's part of that chat that I could have still had with Gurthro for another hour about the depth from a South African perspective, but I understand it. You want to win URC. Yes, it's nice to finish top 8, but are you really going to go full tilt for any of these competitions? But Lyon and there against Racing, again, two French teams, and then Edinburgh, who I think have had a very decent season, and is Sean Everett going great guns against the other opposition
Johan
in
van
URC
Krans Bath.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, up against Johan van Krans Bath. So
And
listen,
up
we
against
might
John
not
van
be
Graan.
there. We might not be there, but there is South African interest. Let's just put it that way.
There is. Yeah, I don't know how we solve for this. I don't know if we'll ever have enough depth. We'll always constantly lose our best players to not just Europe, but to Japan as well. And I think we're probably stuck with this sort of uncertainty around the cup competitions for the next couple of years at least. I don't see a South African team going the whole hog to mount a challenge. There might be temptation. I think the Sharks think that they possibly could in the next year or two, but I don't know. I don't see it necessarily changing anytime soon.
Probably not next year. Let me put it that way. But it will have to change. I think it just comes down to learning how to juggle the two competitions. I think we've only been played in both competitions for 2 or 3 seasons, which just isn't
Mm.
enough time to sort of learn how to go about it. So that's all that's all it is. I know we complain that we don't have the depth, because obviously there's always a French side coming to get some South African players that have done well in this year's URC. There'll be a Japanese side which does the same. There'll be an English side, sometimes even an Irish side that does that. So it's just one of those weird things where, like, yes, I understand that it kind of weakens or juniorizes the South African teams, but it also gives unprecedented sort of opportunities to our youngsters. Gurthrö talks about how they're working on 45 under 16s. When are those under 16s going to start playing in France? Or when they're 19 or whatever. With us, what happens
Right.
is if you play for the under 20s, guess what? Next season you're probably playing URC because there's nobody else in your position. Whereas if you're in
Right.
France and I watched Toulouse play against the Sharks in Durban, I think I did a head count. I think they had 21 or 22 international players. And the guy who wasn't an international, I think he was only a France under 20 player, which means he's going to be an international soon. So what I'm
Yeah.
saying is if you've got that kind of stacked, side, when are your youngsters going to play? In South Africa, we don't have that problem because there's always somebody leaving. And because there's always somebody leaving, someone like J.F. van Heerden, somebody like Lorenzo Julius, you know,
Yeah.
have to step into the breach and they have to get to playing now. And they learn a lot quicker than they should. So what I'm saying is, also guys complain about, oh, we don't quite have the depth. You look at the Bulls. The Bulls have got what, 55 guys who are contracted. Do yourself a
Right.
favor tomorrow. Go to their website and have a look at some of the players that are not being played, all in the name of, yeah, these guys aren't that good. A lot of those guys are incredible players. What they're not
Yeah.
getting is opportunities to play. And I do think sometimes we want to farm players, but at the same time, we also want to play the same 23. You can't do both. You either farm players or you basically go, okay, I'm going to keep rotating players. I just don't think we do a good enough job of rotating players at the moment.
Yeah.
And then obviously the other issue you're gonna have to take out of off the way to make sure that the guys are kind of like have a fighting chance is maybe the salary cap. If your salary cap is at 90 million or whatever, it's just not as good as the French sides. And if it's not
Yeah.
as
You'll
good
never
as the
bet.
French sides, then you're not fighting the same fight. But the problem is once you take that salary cap, you almost kind of like turning competition in South Africa into an arms race based on who's got the most money, which then means basically only two teams really win, which is, the
Yes.
Bulls and the Sharks because they basically backed by billionaires. And then the other teams kind of like fall behind because they don't have that kind of money. So the one way to keep it fair, i.e., for the Lions to also be able to compete in the same pool, is to have a salary cap in place. But then, it's tricky because also if you're going to keep players here, you've got to pay them what they're worth. Too many of our players are double World Cup winners. You have to pay them a sort of a world wage, if you want to call it that. And the only place
Right.
they're going to get paid the world wage is overseas. That's when you start getting guys getting paid 20 million rand a season. And we just not quite there yet, or we're not at a situation where you can have, say, 5 of those guys because that's your whole salary cap. And you still got another, 45 to 50 players to look after. It doesn't quite work like that.
Yeah, it's very tough. And, Gurthro mentioned the cheetahs, and it's got me thinking more and more that in the next few weeks, we need to actually speak to our Francis Steyn to talk about those challenges as well, or at least a Rory Duncan, because I think it's very difficult when you look at just the URC teams, and those are the franchises, let alone the Pumas, let alone the Cheetahs, and other teams as well, and how they have to cope with this. Anyway, Sim, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks to Gurthro, to our friend Connection for joining us. I'm going to be on the road next week. Maybe I can get Liam Delcom to join me because we're going to the Seychelles, which is just very weird. We're going for football. It's strange, but I'll still be on next Thursday talking rugby. I don't know how it happened, but it's happened. And we'll be back next week rather, Thursday, with that Rugby Union Show. I've been Xola. That's thanks once again to Gurthro for joining us. Look forward to seeing you. Don't forget, give us a like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to give Gurthro some love as well on his podcast. It was fantastic to see him. Thanks, Cheers.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.